Okay, time to start. Good morning, everyone. Or it's morning here in Melbourne, Australia. It's 10 o'clock on Friday morning, so I'm already looking forward to the weekend. So I wanted to do this live and just share with you today because I know that the whole positive thinking issue is something that's thrown at a lot of us who live with chronic illness. So we're told that we should just think more positive, and by thinking more positive, then that's going to resolve any of the issues that we've got. And so the topic I want to talk about today is, does positive thinking do more harm than good when it comes to chronic illness? So I'm going to go over a few things, explain a few terms and concepts, where it comes from, what it means, and how you can use your thoughts to help improve your situation and how you feel. So if anybody's watching and you've got any questions, feel free to jump on the chat. I've got my glasses on and I'll be able to see them and answer them either through the broadcast or at the end. And of course, if you're watching the replay, you can always ask me any questions there and I can answer them. So the whole concept of positive thinking actually started with a seminal book by Norman Vincent Peale called The Power of Positive Thinking. You've possibly heard about it. It's been around for decades now, and it's very much aligned with manifestation of things and the law of attraction and things like that. So don't let that put you off, because there are some good things in that concept, like anything else. So Norman Vincent Peale wrote his book, The Power of Positive Thinking, to help people start to focus on what it was that they actually wanted to create in their life and take the action steps towards that. And which makes a lot of sense, right? Because most of us are more focused on what we don't have than what we do have. Most of us are more focused on what we don't want to happen rather than what we do want to happen. And most of us live in this state of believing that if we prepare for the worst, and if we don't aim too high and we don't get too happy and we don't get too excited or expect too much, then we're actually protecting ourselves from hurt, disappointment, pain, and all of those different sorts of things. And that really doesn't make a lot of sense in day-to-day life, because if something's going to happen bad, then it's only going to happen once. But we have the ability, by focusing on it and worrying about it and not wanting it and trying to protect ourselves in this mistaken belief that if it does actually happen, then we'll deal with it a lot better, right? Instead of once, we create that event hundreds and thousands of times over. And because the way our subconscious minds work, it literally believes everything that our conscious mind believes. And that's why we can get involved in books and movies and television shows, because our subconscious mind believes what we're being told is real. And so we can be in there with the characters and believe in them and care about them and follow their stories and get lost in a book or a movie. So without the subconscious mind being the way that it is, we would not be able to enjoy many of the great things in life. So who's coming in? Hello, Maureen, from Phoenix, Arizona. Kelly Fellas says hi from Wisconsin. Hello, Ross. Hello, Terry Brown Richards. And hello, Lisa Beckett. Great that you're watching. So that's a little bit of the background about where the whole positive thinking thing came from. Now, what generally happens when an idea gets out into the public domain, right, and we talk about it and we put our own spin on it and people have their own ideas about what it means, that it often, the meaning that they ascribe to it is very distant from the original intent of the work or the original intent of the theory. Now, a great example of this is the term orthorexia. So the man who actually invented the term orthorexia was describing in his work with people that people who had an attitude towards food and eating where they would eliminate certain foods in order to feel cleansed in a spiritual sense. So they wanted this feeling of lightness and holiness and spirituality. And that also by eating the way that they did, they felt they were on a higher level of consciousness or existence than people who did not eat the way that they did. So it was a sort of a spiritual superiority thing, and to the point where food would become their everything. So their whole life revolved around that food, on how they felt, whether they felt spiritual, whether they felt cleansed, whether they felt closer to God, whether they felt good. And then if they didn't follow their prescribed path of eating, they would feel they had lost that sense of themselves. And so food took on a whole lot of meaning that it really shouldn't, in terms of moral upliftment and spirituality and feeling good and feeling connected with the world and their purpose. So that's actually what orthorexia was describing, right? This fixation with food that had more to do with cleansing of the self, more purification, closer to God, spirituality and moral spirituality and purpose, because they ate in a very different way, that they felt more cleansed and holy and higher than other people. And it is never been a recognised eating disorder by the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual, or the DMS, which I think is up to version 4 or 5, I'm not sure, which is put together by the American Psychiatry Association every year. And that is the foundation on which psychiatric illnesses are recognised, treated and dealt with. And the creator of the term orthorexia certainly didn't think that it needed to be in the DSM or needed to be recognised as a real eating disorder. It was just a theme that he noticed in specific clients that he was working with, that he put this theory together in attempts with his work to help them overcome that. Now, when the word got out into the general public about this, and it's been around for quite a few years, and especially dietitians and other psychologists or other therapists got hold of it, they transformed it into meaning that anybody who cuts out whole food groups for whatever reason, whether it's health, whether it's allergies, whether it's wanting to lose weight, for whatever reason, then had this eating disorder called orthorexia, and they started treating that the same as they would other recognized eating disorders like anorexia nervosa or bulimia, or all of those different sorts of things. So it just shows how a term can get out, and I see it used all the time in ways that the creator of the term and the theory never intended, and it was not meant to be applied to, right? So the term gets used wrongly. So what happened with positive thinking, when that got out and filtered through a whole lot of different people's theories and stories and expectations and experiences, then positive thinking came to be this thing that divided up emotions into either good emotions or bad emotions. And the theory that positive thinking or positive psychology or any of those other isms that go along with it, right, was that you want to be thinking positive all the time, right? If you're not thinking positive, there is something wrong. So you need to be focused on your thoughts at all time, and you only want to be feeling the good emotions like happiness, joy, peace, serenity, all of those things that, you know, are classified as good. So this creates so many problems because it's not realistic, right? It's completely unrealistic. We're not meant to be in a state of joy 100% of the time. That's impossible, right? It's just impossible. It's a completely unrealistic goal to go for. And the other thing that it does, it's somehow, you know, in this division of good emotions and bad emotions, right? It's saying that you need to deny, right? You need to deny and push down and refuse to feel the so-called bad emotions, which are, you know, pain, loss, grief, anger, hopelessness, resentment, rage, all of these things. So people believe that those are bad emotions. I don't want to feel those bad emotions. I don't like who I am when I'm feeling those emotions, so-called bad emotions. So what we tend to do is suppress, right? Suppress them, push them down. And we do this especially with things, the two main emotions that this gets done to is grief. That's the second one. The biggest one is anger. We are not taught how to deal with our anger in a responsible, safe way. We are taught that it's dangerous. We are taught that it is harmful. And so we push it down, squash it down, squash it down. And what happens if you think about, this is the way I like to describe what emotions are like. So if you think about emotions on a string of going from, sadness to grief, to rage, to denial, to peace, to more joy, more happiness, more acceptance, to appreciation. So if they're all on this string and they don't go, that way sequentially, just use this as a concept, right? And there's anger in the middle of the string, and you say, I don't want to feel that anymore, don't want to feel that anger anymore, and you want to repress that, right? So you push that anger down, and that drags all the other things down with it. And if you do this long enough, what happens is all of your emotions start to become suppressed, which means that you feel flat, right? So you feel really flat, and there's no highs, no lows. There's just this flatness or numbness. And then a lot of people ascribe this to depression. So this disconnect from your emotions because for whatever reason you are trying to suppress either trauma, something you don't want to associate with, things that you're afraid of that you don't want to happen, or the anger or the grief that you're feeling, because the belief is, or the fear is, that if you face that feeling, then it's going to destroy you, or it's going to take you down to a point where you won't be able to function. So that's the whole concept of good or bad emotions is just wrong. I mean, it's rubbish. All emotions have their place. All emotions are normal. All emotions are meant to be felt and move through us. So to be experienced and move through us, because they are absolutely appropriate when certain things are happening in our lives. They are appropriate responses. So when somebody that you love hurts you, or you feel betrayed by them, then grief and rage and hurt and anger are completely appropriate emotions, right? So there is no such thing as a bad emotion. Like, take guilt, for example. Guilt gets a really bad rap as this terrible emotion, but guilt is actually a signal. It is just a signal to ourselves that we are out of alignment with who we are, with our sense of morals and ethics and beliefs. When we are feeling guilt, we feel that we have done something against our own code that we don't like about ourselves as a person, that felt mean or petty or spiteful. And guilt is that reminder, that signal to say, hey, look at what's happening here, look at what's happening, and do something about it. Now, where people get stuck in toxic guilt is the belief that they are a bad person, that they're useless, they're worthless, they hurt everybody, they're a burden, they're doing no good, nobody really loves them, nobody could really love them. And all of these beliefs spin around and around and around and form these core beliefs that they live in guilt. And guilt always requires punishment. And so they punish themselves and they refuse to forgive themselves and they feel worthless. So that's a great misuse of guilt, because that's not the purpose of guilt. Guilt is, as I said, it's that signal to say, hey, I'm out of alignment. I did something that feels wrong to me. It's not sitting right with me. I don't like the fact that I did that. I need to try and make amends. I need to turn this around. I need to fix this and get back to who I really am, which means I'm going to own it. I'm going to, go to that person. I'm going to apologize. I'm going to accept personal responsibility for any, formal punishment that there is. So if I've broken the law, I'm going to own it. I'm going to accept responsibility. I'm going to do my time. I'm going to come out of that a better person, because I want to grow and become a better person. So I hope that sort of covers that. We're not meant to live in this state of joy and positivity all the time. It's not human. We're meant to go like that. All right. Now, where this gets interesting with chronic illness is our perception of the experience versus other people's perception of the experience. So when you get chronic illness, it is life-changing. It is often traumatic. It is a loss of the self. It is a loss of the person you used to be. And more importantly, it is a loss of the life you thought you were going to have and the future you had planned, right? And all the things that you were going to do. And rather than this wonderful plan and expectation or belief that your life was going in that direction, suddenly you are chronically ill, you're in pain, your abilities are impaired, depending on what you've got. Your future is uncertain. Your day-to-day is unpredictable. And people without chronic illness do not get the concept of that. They don't understand the magnitude of what's happened. And when you're in this state, right, it's normal to focus exclusively on what's going on because you're in a state of anxiety and pain, and you're not getting that support, you're not getting understood, you're not getting much help from the doctors, and you feel like you are the only one trying to do it all. You are the only person dealing with this. You feel isolated, you feel alone, and yet the responsibilities of life still go on. So you're still, if you're a parent, the children and duties are still there. You've still got to work, you've still got to employ yourself, and now you're in this whole new world of chronic illness with its own language and experiences and rituals and all of these different sorts of things. So it's completely and utterly life-changing. So you're focused on that, right, exclusively, because you're looking for answers, you're trying to find a way to help yourself, you're trying to find some way to move forward, you're trying to find something to make you feel better. So that is the center of your attention, the same as any new big thing we're doing. Like the first time you become a parent, like the baby is the center of your world, and it's this whole new world. You've never been a parent before. So you are constantly talking about the baby and what they're doing, to the point where sometimes your friends get like a bit sick of it. And if they post another baby photo again, I'm leaving Facebook, right? It's a normal response, right, to something major that changes in our life. Now, because the majority of people in the world don't share that experience and they have no concept of it, then they don't understand. So they hear your searches for meaning and wanting to be understood and wanting to be supported and wanting to be empathized with, and as complaining, right? And you always talk about the illness, and you're always focusing on the negatives, and you're always focused on what the disease is doing, and you just need to think positive, right? You just need to think positive, because saying you need to think positive is another way that we shut people down. We shut people down by saying that, because we're sick of hearing it, or we don't have a solution, or we're at empathy burnout. So it's just another way to stop you from complaining, because the other people don't understand your new reality and what's going on. So it is unrealistic to just say, just think positive and focus on the positive. And why this is that you've got to acknowledge and face the other emotions that are calling for your attention first. So you've got to clear the board before you can start to go up the ladder, the emotional ladder, and take those steps from overwhelm and grief and loss and fear and anger and frustration and discomfort, and then starting to find some good moments, and then some acceptance, and then some understanding, and then some feeling of confidence and competency. So you've got to clear those emotions first, or all you will be doing in this search to think positive is suppressing. Now, when it comes to chronic illness, suppressing emotions is not a good thing. Suppressing emotion takes energy. Suppressing emotions creates stress. Stress creates inflammation. Inflammation creates more symptoms. So this is why so many people get stuck in denial. And if you head over to my website at emotionalautoimmunity.com and you sign up to join my newsletter, you will get a free copy of Moving Through the Grief of Chronic Illness, which will show you you can read in great detail the 9 phases of the whole model of grief, specifically for chronic illness, that we go through, and that's going to help you make a lot more sense of what you're going through now. So it's unrealistic to expect yourself to be positive all the time or think positive if you haven't faced your anger, you haven't dealt with your trauma, you haven't faced the grief and loss, and you're still in denial and wanting to believe that this isn't happening, or I'm not going to give this illness any power, or I'm not going to do, I'm not going to make a part of my life. I'm not going to let it define me. In order to live as good a possible life as you can with chronic illness, the chronic illness needs to be integrated into your life as just part of your normal living. So, for example, for myself, after 5 years now, everything that I need to do to support myself with chronic illness is now habitual. I just do it. It's integrated into part of my life. I don't think about it. I just do it, from the way I eat, to the way I sleep, to the way I self-manage my emotions. And this is through practice and repetition, right? Practice, repetition, personal responsibility, understanding the fact that I can't push this away. I can't deny it. I can't think it away. I am a person with 3 chronic illnesses, and it is part of my life. And it's up to me to do what I can to make my life as good as I can, and nobody else can do that for me. Right? So what you need to do is understand you can't go from 0 to positive, right? No 0 to positive. You've got to acknowledge all of the feelings first. And once you do that, you are going to find it so much easier to move forwards, which is why my work with clients in my programs, the very first sessions are spent on identifying and safely eliminating the trauma, finding the sources of, facing the grief, getting out of the denial, dealing with all of those emotions that came along with the experience and the overwhelm, becoming chronically ill. And then once that is done, we've kind of got a clean slate to start now rebuilding ways of thinking that are going to support you rather than drag you down, that are going to create some hopefulness rather than hopelessness, that are going to allow you to stay in this moment and enjoy what you can in the day that you're given, rather than be stuck in the past wondering what you did to create the chronic illness, or why that person didn't help you, or why they're not believing you. Or do what most of us do, which I mentioned at the beginning of this, is create these scary stories and what if situations about the worst case scenario, in the mistaken belief that we are going to somehow feel better prepared if it ever happens. And that just doesn't work. It just brings that experience into your life right in the moment, when the truth is you have no certainty that event's going to happen in the first place. So if we get back to the topic, does positive thinking do more harm than good when it comes to chronic illness? Yes, it does, if your perception of positive thinking is what the general public sees, which is you just need to focus on positive thoughts and everything in your life will be fine and you will feel magically better, right? That is not realistic. And unless you deal with everything else that there's waiting, unless you stop suppressing and you let go of that suppression and you allow your emotions to do what they're supposed to do, which is move through you, then you are not going to get anywhere near the place that's going to enable you to start moving your thoughts and your thought processes and your thought concepts and your mindset to a place where you want to be, which is you want to feel more accepting, you want to feel more appreciation and gratitude, you want to feel more connected to the people that you love, you want to feel more in control, you want to feel that you are able to make choices that positively impact on your health and reduce your symptoms. You want to feel that feeling that I have the ability in my day-to-day choices to create a better future for myself and better health outcomes by the actions and the choices and the words and the behaviors that I'm doing now. So to give you an idea of what I mean by acceptance and focusing on acceptance and gratitude, And remember, I've been doing this for many, many years, right? So I've got a lot of experience with this, and it sort of gave me a shortcut through when I got chronically ill after I went through the trauma and the shock and the grief and processed all of those emotions. I had these skills there waiting and ready to use. So at my worst, say if I were when I was barely functional and I was physically and cognitively disabled, and I spent most of my time either in bed or on the couch. And a lot of that early time was spent just so hyper vigilant about my body, so scared of the scary symptoms I was having with my heart, so worried that I was going to die and my children were going to find me dead, so concerned that I had no future, so wondering what I was going to do because my first doctor had basically said this was now my new life, and my new life was unbearable. And I realized at a certain point what I was doing to myself, and I realized that I was making everything I was feeling worse, right? It was like I was already terrified and I was standing over myself, scaring myself even more, saying things like, yep, you're probably going to die. You're probably going to die tonight, and your children are going to come in and they're going to find you dead in bed, right? We instead of what we normally do with other people that we love, which is if one of your children or your partner or a dear friend or family member were scared and worried and upset and inconsolable, you would go to them and you would offer them comfort, and you would speak to them kindly with a loving voice and as much reassurance, and you would remind them that you were there for them and they didn't have to go through this alone. And that is the complete opposite of what we do to ourselves. What we do to ourselves is we abandon ourselves to the wolves of our fears and we let it rip us apart, and we do nothing to protect ourselves or comfort ourselves or support ourselves at the time when we need ourselves the most. So what I started to do was reassure myself, and that was through statements like, it's okay, Kerry, you've experienced this before. You were all right then, you are going to be all right now. Like it's going to be okay. You can just rest, just lay here and rest. Everything is going to be fine. You've been through this before. Now, let's just relax. Like, so I would just think, just relax and peaceful and calm. And then I would start to think about, well, if I'm in bed, I'm so grateful my bed is so comfortable. And then I would expand beyond that, and I would look outside the window and I would look at my tree out in the garden, and I would appreciate the color of the leaves and the color of the sky, or I would focus on the texture of the sheets or the blanket, or I would look at some of the things that I've got in my room that bring me joy. So I would start to divert my attention from myself and my own inner misery and inner story into the fact that even though this is happening right now, there are things around me, including myself, that can offer me a source of support and comfort, and to begin to relax and begin to comfort myself and begin to feel grateful for the things that I still had in this moment. And through that process, finding acceptance that this is where I am. And the last thing I want to talk about before we finish up here is that a lot of people mistakenly think that acceptance means you're just giving up and you're just rolling over and you're not fighting anymore. You're just going to surrender and just let it all go. And that's absolutely not true. Like, surrender and acceptance are eminently practical. If I'm in bed and I can't lift my arms, then I'm in bed and I can't lift my arms, right? It's no good railing against that or saying that shouldn't be happening. If I can't lift my arms at the moment, I can't lift my arms. That's just the way it is. Now I can say that shouldn't be so, and I can tell myself how terrible it is. And in the process, again, I'm abandoning myself. I can remind myself that, well, there's nothing to do but surrender, because this is the reality. This is the reality. And I need the acceptance of this, because to fight against it continues to hurt me. And if I accept and I surrender to it and say, well, this is how it is for now, and I go back into, I felt this before, and I was okay, and I will be okay again. I step in with reassurance. I have the power to make that moment for me 100 times worse, or I have the power to provide myself with some comfort and relief and support. And I am truly the only one who can do that for me, because I'm with me 24/7. And you do not need to fight an illness. It is not your enemy. When we make something the enemy and we believe we have to fight it, we are pushing ourselves into fight, flight, or freeze all the time. Because when the subconscious mind is convinced that something is the enemy, it fears it and it dreads it and it doesn't want it. And that is the opposite of what you want to do. I don't see the illnesses I have as anything I need to fight. I see them as something that I need to accommodate and work with, and in a sense to soothe them, right? And befriend them and accept them and live, coexist with them, because they are here. That is the reality. My illnesses are here. I But what I can do in this moment, by how I think about it, how I approach it, how I accept it, and how I take those steps in the day-to-day things that I do, like the things I ingest and things that I feel or experience, or the way that I'm talking to myself, or how hard I push myself, or how I schedule my day, or what time I go to bed, or what things I'm focusing on to help myself actively feel better. Then what I can do is have many of those symptoms go into remission, which means they are not currently active, which is pretty much where I am. I still have some things that are there, but the worst of my symptoms that were there 5 years ago are no longer present unless I'm in a flare. So positive thinking, is it a good thing when it comes to chronic illness? Only if you know how to use it properly. Only if you actually accept the fact that not all emotions are good and bad. They all are. They all are signals. They all need to be acknowledged. They all need to be expressed. They all need to be moved through. And once they move through, they are gone, and they create the space for the next thing. But when you're holding it, when you're suppressing it, you cannot go from zero to confident, positive, hopeful, happy, accepting, if you have not dealt with all the things that you're suppressing and hanging on to and don't want to feel. It's not positive. So if you're dealing with someone in your life who's telling you you've just got to think positive, you've just got to think positive, and I think you need to have a very real, come to Jesus talk with that person, and just say, look, when you think that, when I hear when you say that, I don't think you understand the concept of what I'm dealing with. I don't think you understand what chronic illness is. I don't think you understand the fact that chronic illness means permanent. Chronic illness at the moment is incurable. This is not a cold that I have. This is something that I'm living with every single day, doing my best. And I would appreciate it, rather than tell me to think positive, I would appreciate it if you would sit with me and just let me tell you about my fear and how I'm struggling, and offer me some support. I know you don't understand it, but when you say just think positive, I feel completely dismissed, and I feel like you have no idea what I'm going through, and I feel even more alone and isolated. And I feel like when you say just think positive, I feel like you're shutting me down. And that's not a very good feeling, and that's not what I want. And we've got to learn how to have these open, frank conversations. So before I finish up, I'm just going to check if you've got any questions, please ask me now. So Ross says, can we still go through the emotional steps if we are still unsure about our condition? In other words, if we don't have a firm diagnosis, can we still get to a place of peace and serenity? Yes, absolutely, Ross. You don't have to wait for a diagnosis. What you're feeling now is your reality. You know something is wrong. You need to acknowledge for yourself the fact that you are not the person that you were, that it's been life-changing, that it's creating a lot of fear and loss and grief in you, and it doesn't need a name to do that. A name, like A diagnosis can give you some initial relief, but then you realize, even with the diagnosis, that there's not really that much that doctors can offer you. A diagnosis does feel like it offers some legitimacy and proof, which is important. But while you're waiting and working towards that diagnosis, understanding that it takes most people the average of like 7 doctors and 3 to 5 years to get a diagnosis, yes, you can absolutely start working through that process now. If you haven't got my ebook, Moving Through the Grief of Chronic Illness, I'd suggest you sign up for my newsletter. Start there. And remember, you can always contact me and book in for a free discovery session and see if I can help you work through that process. One of the things that I've found is this is really difficult to move through alone. And I'm not saying that just to say, yes, I want you all to come and work with me as a client. I mean, I would love that, of course. But I needed help to get through this, right? So I got therapy from a trusted friend who was also a therapist to help me work through the worst of it, because we cannot do all of this ourselves. We need someone with support and that distance and that professional, ability to be outside of our issues to help us guide ourselves, right? To help us see where we are, to give us that support to do that. So absolutely, I got therapy to get through the worst of it. And once I was through the worst of it, then I was able to implement all the skills I've got and start that process going. So I hope that answered your questions. So I'll just have a quick drink. I'll wait and see if there's any more questions before we finish up. Okay, looks like the questions are done. So thank you to everybody who joined me. I'm planning on doing a lot more of these on a regular basis in the future. So I hope this has given you some information you can use and go forth with. I hope it's given you some concept of, what positive thinking is, and how it's been blown out into this very simplistic thing that it's really not at all. I hope it's led you to understand that there is no good or bad emotions. All emotions have purpose and meaning. There's no such thing as good or bad, right? They're all meant to be felt. And especially to focus on the fact that, what has happened to you with chronic illness, it's not some trivial thing, guys. I mean, people trivialize this, minimize it so much, and gaslight it all the time. It is a huge, significant, life-altering event, and it does not get the respect and support and understanding that it absolutely should. And that is why I make it my mission to talk about these things, because we've got to raise awareness, we've got to educate people, and do not allow people to gaslight you and tell you just to keep thinking positive, because they're too lazy or they're too disinterested to actually listen to what you've got to say. Your feelings are important. You matter, all right? This is life-changing stuff. You matter. You deserve to be heard. You deserve to be recognized. So enjoy your day, and I'll see you next time. Let's see if I can work out how to stop this. Bye, guys.